So the first question is going to be for Nicole. And the question is, why did you decide to partner with Furnitureland South? And then how has the art and sculpture gallery helped enhance that partnership?
Thank you for the question, Sydney. So to give a little background about Nava Contemporary, it really came out of this kind of realization that a lot of people feel very intimidated about the contemporary art market. We came from very traditional white box gallery backgrounds, dealing with a lot of museum quality contemporary art. And it was this realization that people are spending a lot of money on their homes, spending a lot of money on a couch, and then they'll buy a poster to go above it. And so there's been a bit of a disconnect as you're spending so much time and money and effort into really making your home this wonderful place, and then you're buying, you know, a $20 poster to put above a $10,000 sofa sometimes. So we wanted to kind of break down those barriers and make contemporary art much more accessible for people in general, open up the conversation, have a lot more transparency. A lot of times people will not even know what galleries to go to. They will walk into a gallery setting and not know what questions to ask. There is somebody behind the front desk that they can barely see their eyes. And so we wanted to kind of demystify that process. So with Furnitureland South, who's known for their quality home furnishings, it just seemed logical that they should have an art program that's of the same caliber as what it was your guys' mission. And their commitment to excellence and integrity are the same values that Nava Contemporary has. So it just made it seem like we have a very shared mission, and that partnership was the next logical step. With having the gallery space, it's been really wonderful because we can have clients see the artwork in person. There can be a direct conversation about it, and design consultants can easily reference the art, take somebody through the gallery, and show them, you know, how we can initiate a conversation about what's going on your walls.
That's awesome. Very cool. I love what you said about the disconnect between people buying a nice furniture and then not having anything to put with it. And I think it's been a really great addition to our store to be able to offer something of that higher caliber that's going to look beautiful next to their furniture. So that leads us right into our next question. Yeah. So Nicole.
So with that being said, how would clients choose art for their home? Like how should they go about choosing art for their home?
I think the most important thing is that clients should always choose what they love. I don't think that it's about matching the sofa, which may change out in a few years anyway, or matching that bedspread exactly at the moment. It's really about choosing something that you love, because you will always find a place in your home for that. So I would say that that's really the first kind of mission that you should have in looking for something. In addition to that, pick something that has not just something that you love looking at, but has a great concept behind it, so that you really love the concept, you love what the artwork is trying to say. In general, how we work with our clients is we start by discussing their needs. If there's a specific location that they're looking for, or a specific project they're working on, whether it's for an office or a home, we'll kind of start with that, begin discussing budget, begin discussing their timeline. And then from there, we can start introducing artwork to them and really start talking about what the artist is trying to say and seeing how that kind of resonates with them and the greater mission.
So you mentioned artwork for their business. So what would be the best way for a commercial setting or commercial, some of our contract customers to pick artwork? Is it different from residential?
I would say that it is. In a home setting, you can be a little bit more bold. And I don't mean necessarily color-wise, I mean concept-wise. It's your home and it's what you are drawn to and it's what you want to say conceptually. When you're thinking of an office setting, a lot of the time you want to be thinking about something that's a bit more of a crowd pleaser, something that's going to resonate with many different people in many different ways, and that many different people are going to want to look at. So sometimes that's thinking of what type of clients you're trying to reach. If you're going into a lobby setting, let's say, or you have something behind a reception desk, If it's in kind of some more private conference room areas, think about what your employees would want to see. Think about what your mission statement is and how you would maybe want to incorporate that into the design. You can kind of think about the design as a whole too. Designs have concept behind them, and so the artwork should kind of speak to that design and help resonate with that too. Sometimes also there is a factor of durability. If you have a big open conference room that's full of a bunch of windows, you're probably not going to put a watercolor there that's going to fade over time. Or if you have something in a kitchen that's going to be a high traffic area, and people could potentially touch it, or there could be other issues. Again, you want to think about what you're putting there, and maybe a painting isn't necessarily the right choice. Maybe you want something that's framed. So those are kind of, you want to think about commercial settings a bit more utilitarian wise.
Perfect. Very good. So do you have, you kind of started talking about this as far as functionality in the home, but do you have any tips that our design consultants can share with their customers on how to include bold art into an everyday home?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I kind of said before, don't get hung up on matching. The art does not have to match the couch. Things can shift, things can change. Also in general, there's kind of a concept of having a hero in a room. So when you first walk into a room, what's the first thing you want to notice? And quite often that ends up being the art on the walls, especially if you're going for something bold. So think about what you want to be the hero in your room, and then kind of speak to that design. And as I said, pick something that you love. That's the most important thing. You can always change it within that room. You can always move it to other locations. And even if it's something that is small and meaningful, you'll always be able to kind of find a place for it in your home.
Very good. All right. And then the last question we have for Nicole, and then we'll switch to Liv. So our final question is there a difference between fine art and home decor? And can you explain what differentiates those types of art?
Absolutely. So this is a big one that we kind of get all the time. So decor in general is meant to match your couch. It is thinking about something that is, fully based on aesthetics. There isn't necessarily a bigger concept or meaning behind it. And it's not evoking a message, which fine art does. Quite often decor doesn't have an artist name behind it. It's something that's mass manufactured. It's done with cheaper materials. Quite often they're on limited editions. When you're thinking of fine art, you're thinking of pieces that are unique. If it is a print, it's a very limited edition print. And the artist has spent a lot of time thinking about the concept of that work, buying materials that are going to evoke the concept that they are trying to convey, and it isn't manufactured. You really do see the artist's hand and the artist's meaning behind those pieces. Also, fine art can be an investment, whereas decor never is. And also, quite often fine artwork really does stand the test of time. I mean, you see it in museums and you're looking at pieces that are hundreds of years old often. Decor is very flash in the pan. I mean, I think right now you see a lot of decor that's these very inspirational sayings. In 10 years, nobody's going to have that in their home, most likely. So you're looking at a lot more longevity with fine artwork as well.
Very cool.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Nicole, and also Liv, let's face it, you've got to probably talk to clients that don't have a real sense of fashion or art, okay? And I'll use myself as an example, right? How do you do that? How do you delicately say, you were just talking about home decor or what's current or staying current, that kind of thing. How do you gently nudge them toward away from poster quality art toward really fine art? And how do you gently say that? I mean, Liv, you have to walk into some homes from time to time and say, oh goodness, really?
Yeah.
How do you do it?
I think it's definitely like a difficult line, you don't want to offend them, but I think if you come from a place of feeling like you know what you're talking about and you can give them sort of sound advice, I think there is a way to sort of nudge them in the right direction. But as like Nicole was saying, kind of describing the difference between fine art and decor art, is something that can give them a better sense of what you're going for.
I always tell clients to like look again. I mean, just like an athlete trains for a marathon, let's say, you do have to train your eye to be looking at art. And so look at a lot of different things, look often, expose yourself to a lot of art. And once you start seeing how repetitive in nature decor can often be, you realize that you're drawn to something that has a bigger concept. And also once you realize that art really can be more than just aesthetics and that it can be conceptual in nature as well, that I think really adds to a client's experience too. And, you know, I often with clients will try and show them multiple works within a presentation. So I'll know something that's kind of more safe that they may be initially drawn to, and then show them something a little bit more challenging, and then talk to them about what the difference is between these two things and why maybe they should be looking at the more challenging artwork. It really just is exposure for most people, and just introducing them to it.
Awesome.
Very good.
Thank
That was a great question, Blair.
That's good.
That was.
Thanks.
Thank
It took me 10 minutes to figure out what to ask.
It was great.
Yeah, that was great. And that actually led me to ask a question too. So Nicole, I know you guys, you're pretty much talking to that client and kind of figuring out some of their needs and then connecting them to an artist, right? So right off the bat, we're gonna be asking Liv some questions, but what are some fun words or maybe something that your client might be looking for that in your mind makes you think, oh my gosh, Liv's artwork would be perfect for this client?
That is a great question. Sometimes it's scale, in all honesty. You know, Liv has some really large works and has these amazing diptychs and triptychs that can really work in a variety of settings. So sometimes that can be a tip off. I think if somebody is describing something with jewel tones, or that they love really bright, bold colors, I think that's an immediate tip off aesthetically for her work. If somebody is really into music and that comes up within the conversation, Liv titles all of her works after classic rock songs. So that becomes a great talking point a lot of the time, and helps bring people in, especially if they haven't had a lot of exposure to art, but they really love music. It's a really great way to kind of bring them into the conversation. Also, Liv is in Miami, and so if anybody has a Florida connection, that sometimes can be a great talking point too. It's really trying to find things that are accessible most of the time for people, and kind of with contemporary artwork in general, as I've said, you know, it's really about the story behind the work, and everybody's going to find a different story behind a painting. But as a dealer, as an advisor, you are kind of relaying those stories that resonate with you, and then in turn trying to make them resonate with the client. So things that I get really excited about, you know, that comes through, and in turn you can really talk to your client about that too. But Liv's works are both, I mean, conceptually incredibly interesting and also aesthetically really, really beautiful. So it's really an easy conversation most of the time.
So this is titled, the background that we have is titled Baby When I Think About You. What artist sang that, or what band?
Bad Company. It's from Feel Like Making Love, that song. And often when I'm painting, I paint to classic rock song lyrics, either a Pandora station or just playlists that I have. And a lot of times I'll be painting and I'll be like, oh yeah, that was such a good line. And I'll like rewind and write it down, and then later title paintings after that.
Oh, that's so cool.
Fun. That's cool.
That's awesome. And I know we've got a couple more questions about this specific piece. But first, we will ask you just about you. So tell us a little bit more about how you became an artist, professionally or otherwise, and kind of what that path or road looked like.
So it's really interesting. I was painting my whole life, drawing and painting throughout grade school and high school, and then worked my way into getting to Parsons School of Design in New York City. And initially I had thought I wanted to be a fashion designer, so I chose a design major, completed it, got my bachelor's, and then I moved back to Miami. And I had what I think is actually quite common after you graduate college. You kind of have this moment of like, what do I want to do? Like, what now? You know, everything was so structured from, you know, preschool on to college, where you kind of just follow this guideline and timeline, and then you're left sort of trying to figure out what you want to do. And while I was back home, my brother was actually in college at the time, so his bedroom was open, and I just decided I had this urge to paint. And so I bought a canvas, I rolled it out on his floor, totally took it up for his bedroom, and I think I probably rolled it out like 6 feet, and it was the biggest I had ever painted at the time. And I cut it and I started painting, and I actually was using oil paints because I hadn't painted in so long that I didn't really know, I didn't have a style, I didn't know what I wanted to do, because up until then in school you're kind of painting whatever the assignment is, you know, where it might be like, you know, at Parsons it was like go into Central Park and pick a subject matter that's important to you and kind of work around that. This was the first chance I got to really paint something just based on what I wanted, how my mood was. And I painted this full size 6 foot, probably by like 5 feet canvas with oil paint. And I just stretched it on a stretcher bars and hung it up in my parents' home. And it just remained there. And I never really thought anything more of it. And then my parents had a dinner party like a month later. And their friends came over and they were like, oh, Jen, Susie, you know, what is this new painting? Like, I love, and my parents collect art, so they thought it was, you know, maybe a more well-known artist. And hearing their feedback kind of gave me the confidence to continue going, because up until then, you know, my parents liked it and I liked it, but that's very biased opinion. And so I started painting and painting and painting. And still at this point, I never thought it would be a career. I kind of just thought it's what I'm going to do until I figure out what I really want to do. And it really snowballed from there. I just, you know, I went into it not with the stress of it having to be a career choice. And I think that really helped free things up for me. And 4 or 5 years later, now it's my full-time job and I love it. I'm really happy with the route it went. You know, it was very unexpected, but I think because I had studied design, it's really broadened my sense of like the art world and interior design and architecture, and the way that an interior space works well with a painting. So now I have a little bit of both worlds of sort of what Nicole does in putting art in homes. I feel like I understand that better now, having studied design.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
That's so cool.
So is that painting still hanging in your parents' house in the same spot?
It's the one painting that I'll never sell. It's like launched my career, but it is the last one I ever did in oil paint. So
Oh, that's funny.
painting that I prefer acrylic. Oil is, you know, for those who don't know, it's very thick and it's very hard to dry quickly. So if I want to paint and then free up floor space to paint another, since I do paint on the floor, it would take weeks often before I can really stretch it and move it aside to paint another one. And I just like the texture and like the way that acrylic feels on a canvas versus oil. So I had tried that oil one out, but that's the last one I've ever done.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
That's
so the
fun.
one I do is acrylic.
Very nice.
So one of the questions is do you remember your first piece? So I would not consider that your first piece, right? Because you said you've been doing art since you can remember. What is like the earliest one that sticks out to you?
The first drawing that I can really remember, and this is going to sound crazy, but when I was like 6 or 7, my mom took me to see Titanic in the theater. And I was obsessed with Titanic. Like, I just became obsessed with Jack Dawson and the whole story. And I can remember going home and trying to draw a naked lady on a couch. How he was in the movie with Rose.
Yeah.
And that's the first time I remember like drawing something that wasn't just a rainbow or a flower. And my mom was like, you can't do that again. Like, drawing people. but it gave me like the freedom at the subject matter, you know?
That's cool.
Yeah, that's very cool.
That's funny.
That is funny, because that's something that, like, I feel like everyone knows about Titanic and remembers the movie, and that scene is like very iconic. So that's cool.
It is cool.
It
Yeah.
really imprinted on me since I was so young.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
So kind of transitioning into you as an artist. So who inspires you the most, and what is it about them that makes you motivated?
So I know the typical sort of answer for this would be to give you an artist, another famous artist that inspires me, but the realest answer would be to say that my mom is who inspires me the most. As children, we were always driving in the car with her, my dad, and she would try to keep my brother and I entertained in the car. And so she would say, "What colors do you see in the clouds? Like, what colors do you see?" And it was always a game that we would play. Like, I would always say peach, pink, and then my brother would say green, and then you want to come up with the next color. So I'd say like lavender, and it really conditioned me to pay attention to details in nature like that. And I look at the clouds constantly now. It's what inspires my work. And, you know, besides that part of her inspiring me, she was always a great mom and a great career woman, and she balanced it perfectly. And that's really what inspires me the most.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's so cool.
That's so cool. I love that.
My number one.
Oh, so I know you said this was kind of a by accident type of career, just kind of out of the passion for painting and not really knowing what else to do with yourself. But since then, have you experienced any roadblocks along the way and becoming a professional artist?
Well, I think kind of going off of that, there is, you know, like the starving artist stigma, and a lot of reasons why I felt compelled to go into design in college was because you do hear that it can be a struggle to be an artist, and it's a tough industry to be in. And I think that fear stops a lot of people from pursuing their dreams in art and maybe even music and a lot of the creative industries. So I would just say, you know, roadblocks with that would be having to have your own company and the strength that kind of, you know, that you have to keep the company alive. And like, I've learned to be more confident in myself and in my work, and to hustle to get sales. And, you know, art is very personal. And when you put sort of your feelings and your moods on canvas, you do open it up for criticism. And that's something that you have to just learn to accept, that, you know, there's going to be fans and there's not going to be fans. And that's something that's, you know, given me a little bit of a thicker skin, but I think it's so rewarding in the end. And I would say anybody who's thinking about being an artist, or maybe art right now is just their hobby, I would really, really suggest they go for it, because it's just so much more rewarding in the end than the fear that entails it.
That's awesome. That's a really great tip. Very cool. Okay, so I'm really excited to ask this next question, because you kind of started talking about how you like to paint on the floor, which is not, I feel like that's not a common thing for artists.
No.
So
especially big pieces, like
huge pieces like this one behind me. But so tell us a little bit about your practice, how you paint, and how that process plays itself out, and also where, because it looks like you have a nice rug behind you. So I don't know, like, to move the rug. I don't know.
Yeah.
If you want to paint on that rug, that's fine. We can sell you a new one.
Yes.
Totally. So I actually took over my childhood bedroom at my parents' house, and that's my studio right now. It's 18 by 17 feet, so it does have a good amount of floor space. Right now, that's the perfect deal for me, because there's a bathroom, kitchen, I can go outside into the yard, and it's a lot better than a lot of artist studios, and they're a lot smaller if I were to try renting one. But the process is, I basically buy very tall rolls of canvas, and it's primed with a gesso, so it kind of has like sort of an acrylic white layer over it. And I roll it out, and So generally when I start the process of painting, I go solely off of my mood. I don't go in there with an idea of the canvas or the colors that will be used. I roll it out, and sometimes I'll cut it at 5 feet. Sometimes I'll cut it at 9. One time I cut it at 18, and it was the full length of the room. And so it just depends on that day. And I have like all these shelves of different acrylic paints organized by like reds, blues, oranges, greens, you know, like all the color stories. And I'll just start pulling things that speak to me that day, and I'll squeeze them out on a palette. And I sit on the floor. I generally start at the corner of the canvas. That's just, I don't know what the thinking is. That's just how I always do it. And, you know, from the corner, I just start painting. And I'm on my hands and knees like all day. So yoga helps, like try to stay flexible, but it's not so bad. And I just prefer it that way. I've tried 1 or 2 times painting on the wall or on an easel, and it just doesn't do it for me. I like to really work from all sides of the canvas. So one day I can start with what's considered the top, but the other day I might start then on the bottom. And so there's not really, you know, a top and bottom and sides when I'm painting it until it's stretched, and then I decide the way that I feel like it looks best. But I prefer crawling all around on all the sides and painting. That's just, you know, my favorite way of doing it.
That's cool.
That's
Do you give
cool.
yourself like a timeline to finish a piece? Like if it's a
Only
6 foot by 6 foot?
Because with a commission, I'll tell a client it might be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or when I'm, you know, Nicole gets me a commission, I'll tell her like, I think I could do this by this time frame, and we work together with the client on that. But other than that, I really will stop painting when I feel that it's ready. And I think I've probably painted maybe over 100 paintings at this point, and I only think I've maybe finished 2 or 3 once it was stretched. I normally have a feeling that it's done when it's on the floor, and then I stretch it on the wood stretchers. And normally, like, that's it, it's finished to me. So there's only been a few where I've been like, add a little something in that corner, or this section could use a little more glitter. But normally it's just a feeling that I get when I feel content with the work.
So I have a question about that specifically, and that is, what does it feel like when you sell that painting, whether it's commissioned, or maybe Nicole can jump in here too? How does it speak to you? I was on the page of the Nava website, and I know that there's a piece, and I'm going to try to actually share this real quick, that recently sold. And I'm just curious about the interaction with the client, or maybe even how you feel when one of your babies goes into another home, that kind of moment. Maybe you could talk about that.
Feeling, because, you know, I was just thinking about it the other day, like sort of how Nicole was saying that art versus decor, like art can last, you know, 100 years. It is crazy to think that even when I'm gone, the art will still be here and in different families for their generations to come. But I love that. I think that's great.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you see the piece that I'm sharing? This was All That Glitters is Gold. I think maybe Nicole, I don't know if you guys sold it on behalf of Liv, or if this was a consignment piece. Maybe you could talk a little bit about it.
That was actually a piece that sold quite a while ago, and that was actually Valerie's client. So I can't really speak too much about that one, but I can speak to, you know, several other of Liv's pieces in general. There's one piece that I can kind of think of in particular that we actually had that was kind of like a half commission, half original artwork. That was kind of an interesting scenario, was that we had a client who really loved one of Liv's pieces and decided that they wanted it in their home. They brought it in and they wanted to add just like a touch more of a purple to it. So we worked with Liv to send it back and kind of add a little bit to the piece to kind of make it a bit of a commission for the client. And that was a very interesting process. That doesn't happen very often. You know, as Liv said, most of the time she's done with the work and it's done. But this client loved that particular piece so much that we kind of did a half commission, which was really an interesting process, kind of working, you know, across America to try and kind of figure it out. The client was in Sonoma, lives obviously in Florida, sending the piece kind of back and forth, talking about colors and commissions. And that was a really interesting process. And the piece that you're actually showing right now, Blair, that is actually in a corporate collection. That is at a venture capital firm in Palo Alto behind the reception desk. And that was, again, a client that really just fell in love with Liv's work. We had been trying to find kind of the right piece for the right location. They have several different offices. And then they landed on this one as kind of the first piece, the first thing that you see when you walk in. They have this really beautifully designed reception desk, and this sits right behind it. So it's really a nice pop in that office setting.
Liv, we've got to hear the story about you working on a piece after the fact. That's pretty cool.
I know, it was crazy. I remember the painting was a lot of more of the lighter colors. There's a lot of white, and they loved it. It was kind of whites, grays. And then I remember they were putting it in their house, and they really felt, after having it in there, that they wanted that pop of like that slight, almost maroon purple. And so, you know, Nicole asked me if it was okay if they, like, you know, have edits. I had never done it before, but I'm happy to have a happy client, and it's not a difficult ask. So they sent it back, and it was a little bit stressful because at that point you have to really think about where you're placing these new colors. You don't want to overdo it. And if you do, like, there's really no going back to the original, you know, like, then that's what it looks like now. So I started with just sort of little hints, and I really loved how it turned out in the end. I think that they were really happy with it, and I was happy with how it turned out, and I hope it looks great in their home now.
It does. It looks beautiful in their home. I can speak to it. And their home was actually covered in a magazine too. And unfortunately, that piece, since it was in a hallway, wasn't photographed for the magazine in the way we wanted it to. But it's really an incredible piece, and it's not something that we really ever do, is to ask an artist to revisit a piece. But it just kind of was a really interesting synergy. And Liv is so easy and wonderful to work with that she was able to make it happen.
Whatever makes the client happy.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So now we're going to transition. I know we just kind of talked about some specific pieces. I'm going to screen share the piece that's behind me, actually, and I would love for you to talk a little bit about that piece. So give me 1 minute. There we go. Okay. So tell us just a little bit about this piece, what inspired you, what makes it special, and like kind of what status it's in, I guess, whether it's sold or you just completed it.
I believe that one is available. So all of my art is inspired by the sky in one way or another. So this piece specifically is the clouds, and it's in a section where you kind of can see light glowing the edges of the clouds, but then there's that contrast between the darker, heavier gray clouds. And it's the feeling of like the roaming, thundering storm coming in, but yet there's these highlights from the sun that kind of glisten on the edges of the clouds. And I use these specialty paints. They're called interference paints. And why I love them is because they color shift. So let's say you're walking from the left side of the canvas to the right side of the canvas, and you're looking at it, it almost looks like the clouds are moving because the paints shift color. So there are some that go like lavender to blue, some goes a slight pink to green, and then there's golds in there. And I love how it just is almost like the clouds dancing. And I use these opalescent flakes. You can kind of see in the photo that there's that texture of the flakes in there. And I think that there you go, yeah. I think it just adds this great texture to the canvas, so it's not so flat. And I think that for me, it's really like the sunlight peeking through the clouds. And I just love the way that it feels when I'm putting that and adding it to a canvas. And so, you know, obviously when people look at this, it's, you know, you have the deep blues, the light blues, and different highlighting colors. And so a lot of people might think initially like this is the ocean, this is a, you know, coral reef. But for me, it's sort of a color abstraction of the way that I feel when I look at a sunset or a sunrise cloud. So this is just sort of interpreting my mood looking at this scene.
That is so cool. So these little, what did you call them? Opal flakes?
They're basically opal flakes. So it's like a plastic flake and it changes colors. So on top of the paints that change color, we also have the opal flakes.
That is so cool. Okay, I'm gonna stop screen sharing. Nicole and I are like stalking your Instagram right now between questions, like looking at all of the other beautiful works that you've done. And it really is amazing. Nicole like showed a picture and we could see where when you were talking about the contrast of the dark and the light and all that. Oh yeah, you're not gonna be able to see it, but it's on your Instagram.
So like you apparently take lots of pictures of the sky. So we're like, is that a painting or is that a
Yeah, I was like, did you paint that or is that a picture?
Sort of having it in the feed, you know, be a photo of the sky and then the next one is a painting of the sky.
Yeah.
You know, you have to really look like, oh, is that one of hers or is that the sky? Like that's totally what I'm going for. I love that. And
yeah, very cool.
More recent paintings, I've been, since in quarantine, experimenting with a little more of like a realistic cumulus cloud. So those are the clouds that are more rounded and puffy, like the typical cloud you would think of if you were to draw a cloud. So I've really been working with kind of painting those more realistic and experimenting with different colors that I see in the sky. I've really been having a lot of fun with it, and I think I'm liking it a lot. I have one that I'm working on right now that's 10 feet long, and it's going to be like one of the ones I posted of all the sort of peachy purple skies and clouds. So I'll keep you guys up to date on that one because I think it's going to come out really good.
Yay. Well, now we follow you on Instagram, so we'll be able to see. That's so cool.
Also, there's a really great, I don't know if it's up on your Instagram, Liv, or if you just shared the picture with us, but we had worked, Valerie had worked very closely with Liv on this commission for a hotel in Doha that has this just incredible, Liv, you did how many canvases? 12, I think, for them? Yeah, 12 that were installed in their main lobby, and quite a feat. And it's just an absolutely stunning image.
I'm dying to go. I need to get over there and see them in person because I've only seen them installed in photos. I would have ideally liked to go this year, but I know, you know, things are kind of crazy now. So one day I'll get to go see them, but that was such a crazy fun project to work on because not only was they doing 12 for their lobby, but they were 12 huge paintings.
Yeah.
So
I'm looking at the pictures of that, and it looks like they're somewhat within the same color palette, but kind of not. So did they direct you in how they wanted it, or they just said have at it?
Yeah, so there's like sort of two sections of the lobby. One has a collection in the blues, and then one is a collection in the golds. And I think the photo you're looking at is the blues.
Yeah, correct. I can see both of them, but
basically what they wanted was for the whole wall to resemble one painting, but sort of chopped up in different size canvases. And I had never done that before, but it was really great. It was such a cool experience to work that way.
That's cool.
Very cool. Okay, this is like a a transportation question. Were you so nervous shipping your paintings from Miami to Doha? Because I've actually flown to Doha. I've been there before. I was visiting my friend in Thailand and I stopped. So I know how long that is to get over there. Were you, first of all, were you freaking out? And second of all, how do they even transport works that are that large?
Valerie and I worked pretty hard on figuring out the shipping aspect of it because, I mean, for one, you have to get through customs. So there's like a whole issue there that I had never done before. So basically, I think Nicole probably knows, but they hired a company to come and roll up the canvases. It was like a white glove, very meticulous system. So they lay out this glass sign sheet, and then they lay out the painting, and then they lay out another glass sign sheet, and they very closely roll it. And they put it in sort of just big cardboard rolls. But it was a little bit scary because those paintings have a lot of copper leaf on them. And it's hard to describe how delicate copper leaf is, but I mean, if you even lightly touch it, it's stuck to your finger. Like it will transfer that easily. And so normally if I'm working for a client or a commission, I will, kind of say like, we're doing the copper leaf, silver leaf, gold leaf, any of the foil leaves, it has to be shipped stretched. But this was such a special project and I really wanted to make it happen. So I was a little nervous about the rolling because I'm sure when it unrolled, a lot of it stuck. So I was pretty careful with putting a lot of extra foil on top so that in the event that some came off on the upper surface, there would still be enough on the bottom that it gave it the effect that I wanted. And in the end, we were fine. So it was good, but it was tough. Like when it was shipping over there, I was nervous about it, nervous to hear how it, got opened. But,
yeah, really.
Now this may go back to Nicole, but did they come to you guys or did they see Liv's work somewhere, or how did that even come about for a project that size?
So they actually had worked with a designer who we have a relationship with. And so they were looking actually for something personally, and then mentioned in passing, I'm also doing this like hotel project. They didn't need really furniture for it. They needed art. And they said it to this designer in passing, and the designer went, oh, have you spoken to Nava Contemporary? Let me introduce you. They actually probably have somebody perfect for the project. And so that's how it came to us. So it was kind of this like funny roundabout way that wasn't even the project that they were working on with the designer, but it was wonderful. And it kind of shows how, just talking about sometimes the mundane things really sparks this amazing creativity and collaboration.
I always find that someone knows someone who knows someone that you could befriend and is looking for something that you might be able to help them with. I think the connections are really important in the industry.
Yeah, very
Agreed.
Cool. We definitely believe in the relationship aspect of things too, for sure. So that's really cool. You kind of already talked about our next question, when a painting is finished. So kind of going back to your personal life, what is one thing that you wish people knew about being an artist?
So I think that, like going back to the starving artist stigma, I would like people to know that, it's okay to follow your dreams. And I know that it's scary and, so I know one of the questions is kind of about like how you could encourage young artists or support young artists. And I think the best way is to start young. I always felt that I had the option to be an artist because my parents really supported that for me, if that's what I wanted. And, I know being active is great for kids and being in sports, but I think that if you have a child who's kind of drawing a lot or wanting to play music, that shouldn't be sort of shut down. Because a lot of people grow up thinking that, being an artist is not an option. And I think that it's important for people and, young kids to feel that they can follow their dreams and they can try it out. And, they don't have to be sort of shoved into one career that they think is just going to make them money, but that they're not going to be happy in ultimately. So I think that's an important way to support artists.
Cool.
That's
Very cool.
great.
Yeah.
Very good. And so for us watching, how can we support artists that we love?
Well, just like you just said, looking at my Instagram, following along on social media, I mean, obviously the main way to support is to buy a painting, but there are so many ways you can support an artist besides that, which is just, telling people about their work, or if you hear somebody's buying a house and needing to decorate, or wanting to go to an art gallery, it's those connections and really spreading the word and spreading an artist's name. And, social media now is just, it's everything. It's just like the world we live in now. And so supporting the Instagram or showing the website off and just that whole social media aspect, I think is a pretty major way to support.
Very cool.
I would also kind of jump in and say too that on kind of a local level, especially for people who are newer to contemporary art, and as I said, looking all the time is really important, is to kind of get involved locally. There's always benefit auctions that are happening for some nonprofit arts organizations at a local level that you can always kind of turn to. I know that at least within the Bay Area and New York, which are obviously kind of major metropolitan areas, but a lot of like elementary, middle school, high school auctions and benefit auctions often have artwork donated to them. And that's a great way to kind of be introduced to artists and start looking at things and supporting your local community in that way too, so that you can grow it and then, be looking at artists internationally as well.
Right.
Very cool.
Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask?
Hey, it's Jade. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Hi, Jade.
Okay. So I am in the gallery looking at all the pictures that we have here. And I have a question about the application of the different glitter. Like I definitely see what you're talking about, the opaque, the opal pieces, but then I see a lot of glitter. Do you use that with a brush, or do you sprinkle, or you just do whatever you feel at that moment?
So generally I'll get like a plastic bowl, and I'll put in the amount of glitter that I want depending on the size of the canvas and the area I'm putting it in. And then I'll pour in this clear medium, so it dries clear and it goes in clear, and it's like mixing like in a kitchen. I mix it up, and then I get a palette knife and I spread it in the area that I want. And since I'm working on the floor, it's perfect, so it doesn't, the medium doesn't drip. And then it'll probably dry by the next day.
That's very
That is
cool.
cool.
Yes, I mean, just seeing you on this and listening to you, it makes looking at these paintings even that much better. So I really appreciate your time today. This is really cool.
It is really cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. Very cool.
I really want to go to Furnitureland South and get to meet all you guys and see them there. Hopefully when this is over, we can make it happen.
Yes.
Absolutely. We'd love to have you.
We would love that
Cool.
too.
Yes. Nicole, do you have anything else that you want to say or talk about? Or you, Liv, if you have anything else?
I think just generally kind of, while we have the audience, I hope that now you see that, the art has a lot of meaning behind it, and that, Nava is very approachable, that if you have any questions, it should be hopefully an easier kind of barrier to cross. On the client side, for any presentations or talking to your clients or anything, obviously our services are free. And so, it shouldn't hopefully be a hurdle that if there's somebody who has any questions about kind of what to put on their walls or kind of how to start collecting or, anything on kind of that most basic level, we're always happy to have those conversations and kind of see where they lead.
Perfect.
Very good.
Yeah, so I have one quick parting question for Liv, which is, I know your pat answer is probably like, well, my art is for everyone, or everyone should be able to appreciate elements of my art. Is there anyone in particular that your art speaks to? I mean, is there an appreciation of color of of movement, of texture, whatever. I mean, is there something we should be as salespeople on the lookout for your clients?
Right. Well, I think one thing Nicole mentioned that kind of connecting them to the title seems to do well. A lot of clients love knowing that it's from classic rock song lyrics, and they're like, oh, I know there's some there that are Beatles songs, and maybe you could be like, oh, the artist, she titles them from Beatles songs, and they kind of feel connected to it in that way. But other than that, I mean, I think, like you said, the art is for everybody, but I would love somebody who has an appreciation for the subject matter and like sunsets and sunrises and, the days where the clouds are out, but they're pink and they're purple. And that's really what drives me, is an appreciation for that. And I think them knowing that connection to the work would probably mean a lot.
Awesome. Thank you.
Very good. Well, Liv, Nicole, thank you guys both so much for your time today. I know that was awesome for us to be able to just hear you talk about your art and see your passion for that. And then obviously, Nicole, we're thankful for this partnership and that we're able to have these conversations about art, and we hope to do it again very soon.
Definitely. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been so wonderful.